This week's Revolution Report. Capitalist boomers offer themselves up as human sacrifice to the free market as the coronavirus pandemic continues to ravage the Western world with increasing speed.
I would rather have my children stay home and all of us who are over 50 go in and keep this economy going and working. Even if we all get sick, I'd rather die than kill the country.
The U.S. State Department tells countries with some of the highest coronavirus-related death tolls to refuse medical help from Cuba because the island nation's government exposes its doctors to, quote, labor abuses. And capitalism, the system apparently most effective at allocating resources, is forcing farmers to dump their product, while workers stand in grocery stores with empty shelves. Let's roll the intro.
Auf, nur zum blutigen heiligen Kampf, bezwinge die Feinde, du Arbeitervolk. Auf die Barrikaden, erstürme die Welt, du Arbeitervolk.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Revolution Report. This video is the first in a new series on this channel where I'm going to talk about some of the most recent and most ridiculous excesses of capitalism going on in our world today from the perspective of a 21st century Marxist-Leninist. So make sure to leave a like, have a discussion, leave feedback in the comments section, and subscribe for more. Now let's jump right in. First, we should talk about what Glenn Beck said before. We've all heard this coronavirus cliche from a number of people, specifically from young people like me. The disease only kills old people. I'm not worried about it. I'm still going to go about my life as usual. YOLO. At first, I just thought to myself, okay, how far has our cult of the individual come where people don't even care if an entire section of the population lives or dies, as long as their everyday lives aren't affected? But now a bunch of boomers from a more traditional and nationalistic brand of capitalism are saying, yeah, let us die if it means saving the economy. This is what capitalism has come to? Human sacrifice to the system so it doesn't sacrifice us all to bread lines and the unemployment office? Alright, you might be thinking, Glenn Beck, he's washed up, nobody cares about him anymore, he's just trying to get attention, but Glenn's not the only one calling for the lifting of social distancing and self-isolation at the height of an international pandemic. We're hearing this stuff from a lot of conservative political commentators, like Heather McDonald. She doesn't seem to mind culling the elderly either. The coronavirus is targeted in its lethality, overwhelmingly striking the elderly or the already severely sick. Sad to say, those victims were already nearing the end of their lifespans. They might have soon died from another illness. Even if my odds of dying from coronavirus should suddenly jump 10,000-fold, I'd happily take those odds over the destruction being wrought on the US and global economy from this unbridled panic. This guy, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, also made an appearance on the Tucker Carlson show, saying he's ready to make the ultimate sacrifice if it means preventing the economy's utter collapse.
We got a choice here, and we're going to be in a total collapse, recession, depression, collapse in our society. If this goes on another several months, there won't be any jobs to come back to for many people. But the point is, our biggest gift we give to our country and our children and our grandchildren is the legacy of our country.
You're basically saying that this disease could take your life, but that's not the scariest thing to you. There's something that would be worse than dying.
Yeah.
There's probably plenty of people in the 60-plus age range who would probably say something like, speak for yourself to all this social Darwinism. But I'm just here thinking, maybe if the richest country in the world had a system that made sure everyone had a job and nobody had to go homeless, we wouldn't have to sacrifice anyone to the free market's insatiable thirst for human life. Next, we've got the US State Department, which apparently has no problem letting thousands of people die from the coronavirus in exchange for a cheap jab at Cuba. It's kind of like in 2009 when Hurricane Katrina ended up killing nearly 2,000 Americans. Cuba offered to send doctors along with medical supplies, and Washington said, you know what? Nah. And gave no reason why. This time Washington is saying Havana is subjecting its doctors to egregious labor conditions, and so countries like Italy, with the highest coronavirus death toll, should just refuse the help because the US says so. The government of Cuba keeps most of the salary its doctors and nurses earn while serving in its international medical missions, while exposing them to egregious labor conditions. Host countries seeking Cuba's help for the COVID-19 should scrutinize agreements and end labor abuses. The State Department wasn't specific about what exactly these labor abuses were, probably because they were made up. But what's truly laughable about this statement is the State Department's fake concern for the well-being of Cuban doctors. If Washington is so concerned about Cuban workers, it should lift the illegal embargo it's had on their homeland since the 1960s. To give you an idea of how severe its effects are on the Cuban economy, between April 2018 and March 2019 alone, the Cuban economy lost over $4.8 billion in potential trade revenue. That's according to a 2019 report by Cuba's mission to the United Nations. More recently, the embargo blocked a donation of millions of masks and hundreds of thousands of coronavirus test kits from the People's Republic of China. The American transport company hired to move it was too afraid of what Washington would do to them. So, yeah, communism's to blame for the hardships in Cuba, not the country's decades-long isolation from world trade. Sure. Finally, we go to Arizona, where dairy farms are literally dumping thousands of gallons of milk a day. We go to Florida, where vegetable farms are destroying 1 million pounds of their produce a day. We cannot pick the produce if we cannot sell it, because we cannot afford the payroll every week. We'll have to tear them up, beautiful vegetables that really could go elsewhere, to food banks and hospitals and rest homes. Why are they doing this when many of America's store shelves remain empty? While we're in a recession, restaurants and retailers aren't buying the product. Migrant workers, the most exploited and also the most valuable workers in agriculture, also can't show up to the harvest because of the lockdown. The very links of the economy's supply chains are coming apart, not just in the United States, but around the world. Who's to blame here, though? It's not the farmers' fault. They have to make a living too, after all. The only way to stay afloat when prices fall from lack of demand is to destroy the excess product. If they try to sell it, the prices will fall even more. If they try to donate it, there's big transportation and processing costs involved. It's not the migrant workers' fault. They make so little in wages, I guarantee most of them would work despite the danger of infection if they could. No, it's the fault of an agricultural system based on profit. The current crisis of U.S. agriculture even began before this pandemic, after Donald Trump declared a trade war on China to protect the interests of the U.S.'s financial and industrial capitalists. It put many farmers out of business, and now the leftovers are facing even more problems. This system's lack of coordination between farms, distribution, and retail, and the recurring crisis of overproduction is part of what Karl Marx called the anarchy of capitalist production. As long as increasing profit by any means necessary continues to be the end goal of our entire economy, recessions will continue to be inevitable, each almost always worse than the last. Meanwhile, the capitalists will get richer, and the workers will get poorer. Already 16 million Americans and counting have joined the ranks of the country's unemployed over the past 3 weeks. That's double the total job losses from the entire 2008 recession. We're only at the beginning of an economic meltdown, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Great Depression. And based on the history of the 1930s, as well as of other economic crises of capitalism, we know that there are only 2 reset buttons. A revolution which will bring the state under the control of the working class and break the cycle of worsening crises, or war, which will make room for the system to build upon what it needed to destroy to survive. The outcome that comes our way can only be determined by the action or inaction of us, the 99%.